So I'm filming this on the day that Ricciardo has gone to McLaren, Sainz has gone to Ferrari, so excuse my smug face. Alright, so this is one of the, the iconic comparisons, the iconic battles, okay? Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. And obviously Ayrton Senna, he gets the majority of the limelight for sure, and is considered to be one of the greatest of all time. And Prost is generally kind of overlooked, and I guess the topic of this video today is to put my opinion out there, which is that I actually think Prost was the more complete package, and if it was up to me and if I was a team manager and I had the choice between the two, Alain would be my guy. Let's cover the basis of my kind of argument and my points, and we've got a special guest as well who's going to make an appearance very shortly. So my first point, I want to talk about the 89 San Marino Grand Prix. Team orders were at play, and I'm not a fan of team orders, okay, but if you're going to adopt team orders and both drivers are going to agree, then you need to be consistent and carry them out. So basically the team order was that whoever led into the first corner, because Prost and Senna were teammates, would stay uncontested and win the race. And basically Prost led into the first corner, there was a restart, and then that's a restart, they restarted to start the race, and then Senna was like, oh no, that reverses the decision, so now he can go ahead. Basically, Senna snaked Prost. This is an incidence of something I maybe didn't like so much about Senna. He was much more selfish, which you have to be selfish to an extent to be a successful race driver. But for me, that was a mark on his card. I bring a lot of parallels between Alonso and Senna, actually, because both incredibly talented drivers, but both with huge egos and ruffled a few too many feathers for my liking within their teams, and weren't always the most kind of, constructive of teammates to have. 1990, Suzuka, totally unforgivable. And it's such a contrast to the man that Senna became, because, it's well documented that at Imola in 94, the Grand Prix that he died at, he was on it. He was very much the driver who was pioneering and commanding safety in Formula 1. 1990 Suzuka, he clearly drove into Prost. And for me, that's a bad reflection on him. In the same way that Schumacher's done the same. In terms of these drivers who, I massively respect their talent, Schumacher and Senna. Of course, you can't not. But in terms of the way they went about things, for me, that's unsportsmanlike, that's cheating, and that's not an honest and genuine way to win. We forget that Prost won 4 world titles, almost 6 if he'd been a bit luckier, if the grass had, rubbed a bit differently for him. And he had the most wins in Formula 1 history before Michael Schumacher came along. I don't think Prost gets anywhere near the respect that he deserves. So, as I mentioned earlier, we have a guest, someone to give an alternative side, someone who's very much Team Senna. So, welcome. I haven't really done many guests on this channel, but I thought this was a good opportunity. My good friend, Zach from ApexF1. First of all, how are you, Zach?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing pretty good.
Take it away, mate. Why are you Team Senna?
The big facts as to why Senna is superior to Alain Prost. And really, we have to start out at the beginning, his very first season with Tommo in F1. And we have to remember that race in Monaco in the wet, where he went from, I believe, farther back on the grid all the way up to the front, and an absolutely shocking drive around Monaco, which, as we know, even in today's cars, is an absolutely impossible track to get around. And that Tommo, I don't even want to think about how difficult that would have been for him to get through that race. I mean, we have to also move on to when he went into Lotus. He lapped every single car but one in his maiden Grand Prix victory at Portugal, which is insane because that Lotus car was good, but I mean, he still had to get through some pretty quick cars in the rest of the field. I mean, for his first Grand Prix victory to be that monumental is insane. Prost is known as the quote-unquote professor because he was able to calculate every single move and do all of that. But I mean, when it really comes down to it, the measure for me of a driver is raw speed. And that's exactly what Senna had. He was just fast, and there's so many instances, especially, I don't remember what year it was, but it was Monaco, where he was leading Prost by like a minute, and they told him, like, Ayrton, slow down, relax, just take the win. And then, of course, he binned it and lost the car and retired from the race, which obviously we see as a detriment, but I see that as a positive because in the later years when he had more experience, I mean, it just, he was so fast and so consistent and so on the edge. And for me, that's how I measure how good a driver is, not if they can do some math in their head while they're driving the car. How fast can they go while they're doing it?
So, well, okay, so say, Zach, for example, your team principal, and you had the choice between Ayrton and Prost. Would you go with Ayrton?
Yeah, of course.
You would?
100%. So if I'm, so are you saying like if I'm the team principal of, say, those 80s McLarens with both of them in the car?
Yeah, if you want to secure maximum points, if you want to do the business, if you want to deliver for the shareholders good results, you're going with Vettel and Senna. Because for me, I'm very much Prost. Because again, this is the thing. Like, so and we talked about this before. Like, I see a lot of parallels with Fernando, in terms of, Alonso, incredibly talented, incredibly like raw pace, like you say, but and there's plenty of documented examples of Senna, just being a bit of a toxic presence in teams at times. And I know this might sound sacrilege to say, but it's true. It's like it's irrefutably true. He wasn't always the best team player, and for me, what made Prost so great is that he was able to deliver the results, but also I felt he was just more of a kind of team player, if you ask me, and that's a big part of being a successful driver.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's tough because when you're thinking about F1 as a team sport, that is obviously a big part because there's an entire separate championship for the constructors.
Which, of course, it is a team sport.
It is.
That's not.
But I think when we're looking back on who is the better driver, individually, taking the teams away from it. If I have Senna versus Prost in a 1v1 showdown, which obviously we're never going to have, but I'm willing to bet Senna would best Prost any day of the week.
Because obviously they did have plenty of... That's the thing. What's a shame about these two is that they're only really remembered for obviously the Suzuka incidents. But they're actually not remembered for what was actually great, which was the countless battles they did have. Sometimes Senna came out on top, sometimes Prost did. For me, in terms of like raw speed and talent, I don't really think there was anything in it. But I just, in terms of the cohesiveness of the team and, having less of a kind of, troublesome, for want of a better term, presence at times, not always, because of course Ayrton won his titles. And again, like Prost had the most, Grand Prix victories, before Schumacher overtook him. And again, obviously, and this is a pretty hot take, but I do genuinely think that, if Senna hadn't passed at the peak of his time, when anyone goes before their time who's kind of a top in their sport, in their discipline, and it was such a shock, he's almost got this status that will always have him kind of considered in this different manner almost. I feel like if it was Prost who'd passed, then it almost might have been the other way round. Plus Senna's incredible fan base in Brazil. You can't.
That's the thing is there's so many drivers in the past from France that have been successful. Like Alain was not the first one, and Ayrton, as thoroughly documented in the Senna documentary, he was kind of a glimmer of hope for that country because in that time there was lots of civil disarray and that's not a word. Disarray and stuff like that. So he was definitely like elevated to that even higher status of like legend just because of what he did for that country. And does that kind of fade the perspective of was he a better driver? I don't know, but I think for me, like we were talking about earlier, I mean, for me the level of a driver's legacy on F1 is how they're remembered. And I think when you look back on F1 history, I mean, for me at least, I think of Senna before I think of Prost.
And I think everyone does. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Like Senna's name, like you say, has become legend. But again,
Mhm.
if I look at specific incidents and the juxtaposition of how he was, again, up until his death, he was, the most vocal driver about driver safety, probably after the Comus incident, Spa, where he pulled him out of the car. But before that, I think he showed blatant disregard for safety of himself and other drivers. I mean, for me, Suzuka 90, where he just drove into Prost, and I've looked at that footage countless times, and for me, there's no doubt that he intended on having an accident there. To me, that's
Right.
And Schumacher did the same occasionally. He's been guilty of it as well. And for me, that's a massive black mark for me. I'm not like I don't. What do you make of that incident?
Well, the only thing I make of that incident is, yes, it was unfortunate, but I think when we look back on this, there was two incidents. There was the second incident in Suzuka and the first as well. And I think for me, it kind of levels it out, because the first incident into the chicane, I think Prost was at fault for that, because obviously he wanted his title. And I think the second incident, I think it was into turn one, agreed. It was definitely Senna's fault, because he likely wanted that title as well. So I think for me, that kind of negates it. It kind of levels it out.
Oh, I don't know, man, because that first one, the 89 one, Senna comes from so far back, and he's got no right to that corner as far as I'm concerned. But I do agree that Prost, if he'd have looked, like, he would have avoided that.
He was right alongside him. Yeah.
But I don't know, man. I don't know. I think the second incident is far more in Senna's fault than the first one. I think they're both equally at fault for the first one, in my opinion. And we know as well that 90 incident, Senna was annoyed before the race about being on the dirty side of the grid and all that. So he was kind of he was one, but that wasn't Prost's fault. Like, that's just the way the tracks, and I don't think that excuses. I mean, he did it and he won the title, but I just think like a true. And again, this isn't equally an issue I have with Schumacher, because he'd done the same, and he tried to take people out in order to actually like to form his position. I think, like, if you're going to go, like, for me, that's if you're going to purposefully take someone out, that's cheating.
No, yeah, for sure. And I think it's tough because watching back the Senna documentary definitely shines a lot of light, especially since it's so fresh. And the other thing that we really can't forget is Prost's relationship with the governing body, the FIA. And there's that whole, controversy of Senna was given that line in 90 when he got pole because they knew Prost would be able to get the better start. So it's hard for me to totally disregard that. Because I think Senna, I would have been pretty mad if I was Senna, and I knew that was kind of corroborated in a way. I would have gone for that move as well. I would have definitely stayed right alongside, and if the door's open, I'm gonna go for it. So I don't know. It's
a tricky one. We're never going to know exactly. We're never going to know exactly his intent, right? We're never going to know. If that hadn't have happened and he'd still been second, if he'd have got the better line but a poor start, would he have still gone into the side of him? I think he would, but I don't know, and no one knows. And that's the thing.
The problem is, we can't really ask him now because of everything that happened. And I think, looking back on, if he was still with us today and he was able to look back on it, he may have given us some different insight on it. And now all we have is Prost's word. But I mean, yeah, it's such a gray line, and it's so easy to go on either side of the fence. But I mean, for me personally, I think Senna in a one-on-one shootout would win, in my opinion.
Fair enough, Zach. Well, I think obviously this is an age-old debate. This is arguably the most contested of all.
It'll never stop.
No, it will never stop. That's the thing, mate. It never will. And I'm sure everyone in the comments will be having a field day. But obviously, I'm going to put a poll at the top. Which team are you on, Prost or Senna? Do you follow the general consensus, the hero status, legend status that Senna has, or do you think actually Prost maybe deserves a bit more credit and actually was maybe the better? I guess I'll phrase the question is, who would you have in your team? Who would you choose if you were, you're the one who's next on the line if they crash into each other, right? So who are you choosing? But yeah, Zach, thanks for taking the time, mate. Obviously, I'll leave a link to Zach's channel at the top of the description. But for everyone who's watching who doesn't know about your stuff, give yourself a little sales pitch, mate.
Well, I mean, if you come on to ApexF1, we're going to be trying to upload weekly content for you guys. My kind of specialty is kind of having a knack for knowing good liveries and stuff like that. We've got lots of stuff down the pipeline, and really excited to kind of use this extra time during this whole world situation to make some quality stuff for you guys to watch and enjoy.
No, I wouldn't have Zach on if I didn't believe in his stuff. He's got really good content and he deserves a lot more support. So if you're interested, give him some love. There we go. Don't forget to drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, notification bell, all that good stuff. And again, don't forget to visit Zach. My name's been Tommo. Your name's been Zach /
My name has been Zach. You got it.
Your name has and always will be, I guess. I mean, you could change it if you wanted.
If I really want.
Thanks again. Have a good one. Say bye, Zach. Bye.
See you guys.